I had gone to the mountains in early April in pursuit of truth. I was lodged at a remote stay in an even more remote village, high up near the clouds. It started snowing heavily on the day I reached it and continued snowing for 3 more days. I was sitting on a chair with beautiful snow-covered mountain peaks in front of me. It was a sunny afternoon and fresh snow was melting, creating a beautiful landscape. I was tripping on acid alone, although I was accompanied by the owner, Kinney, and manager, Stan, of the place where I was staying, who were very positive and comforting. As I started peaking on LSD, I sat in the sun, dissolving in the warmth that its rays provided me after the constant snowfall and cold weather. I was sitting on my chair when I was asked to light up the joint of Chang. The smoke didn't seem to hurt my throat and lungs at all, and it was really easy to hold it in. The joint was shared between Kinney, Stan, and me. It was soon finished, and I could feel the trip coming on. Suddenly, all the colors became super bright. It felt like I had reached another level of color perception, which was previously impossible. Everything was shining very vividly. The trees in front of me started morphing and dancing and spinning in their place. I could hear them laughing and talking to everything. This is when I knew I was in for a wild ride. Suddenly, I could feel gears moving throughout my body. I could breathe in more deeply than before. The colors were so bright that it was almost blinding. The atmosphere felt soothing and comforting, as if all the worries of the world just faded away from my mind. I felt completely naked, even though I was wearing a few layers of wool. It felt like the boundaries of my body had completely dissolved and the wind was blowing right through me. DMT had completely captured my attention. At this point, it seemed like layers of reality were peeling off, and I was able to perceive what lay behind this curtain or veil of reality and ordinary consciousness. It felt like a very big update was being downloaded to my human brain. The sky became a superdome with clearly defined boundaries, and I saw jesters atop the mountain peaks. There were thousands of them standing behind turntables and mixing records. There was a high-pitched frequency that I could hear. The jesters were making this music on their turntables, and they were rapidly increasing the frequency. It got so loud that I was unable to hear anything else. Time seemed to have sped up for me, because now I was hyper-aware of everything which was going on around me. Every passing second of normal life felt like hours of being bombarded with extremely beautiful cosmic and planetary sceneries. This is where I started to panic. The whole experience has gotten extremely intense, more intense and weird than anything I've ever known. Thoughts, images, feelings, etc. were happening so fast that I felt like I could no longer keep up with it, and I was going insane. A clear thought formed in my mind. I am dying. I thought that I came so far away from civilization. I took a bunch of very strong psychedelics with people I had met only a few days ago. I had always wanted to push my limits, and throughout my past, I have sought to recreate near-death experiences through these substances. But this time, I have done too much, and I am going to die. I had read about the feeling like dying in various trips, but nonetheless, it seemed very real when it was happening to me. I accepted my death. I let go. I surrendered. I said to it, "Take me with you. I want to get on this ride." From this moment, I could no longer differentiate between reality and hallucinations. I was completely lost in the experience. I had no sense of my body, my mind, my past, my history, my family, and everything else. I was pure awareness, aware of everything which was visible and invisible, known and unknown, divine and devilish. I was still present in my body, and I could open my eyes when it was overwhelming, but my vision was bombarded with extremely beautiful hallucinations. I should also mention that throughout my experience, I was still the same person, which means I was not extremely happy or sad, or numb, or confused, or horny like with other drugs. I was still the same consciousness, but it felt like I was looking at ordinary reality in the way that it truly exists. But I had been brainwashed by my culture to ignore it throughout my life. I was seated on a chair and faced the mountains, but I felt like I was suddenly moving without actually moving. My whole body had a weird sensation of liftoff. The layers of melted snow created certain patterns which pulled me in towards it. I was sucked into those beautiful patterns which looked like God Ganesha, riding on an elephant. It transformed into cosmic sceneries of the universe, where I was floating, or rather, falling through the infinite space. I had the physical sensation of being crumpled up like a piece of paper and tossed into hyperspace at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But there was no fear because I believed I was already dead, and now I'm in the afterlife. Futuristic tech and cyberpunk imagery was floating into my vision like a dam in a rainstorm had been broken apart. Some parts are very hard to explain using regular words here. I was conscious of my experience, but it was so utterly weird and confusing and completely bizarre that English words will fail to translate the true meaning. I remember feeling a warm and loving embrace by the entire planet, and I felt like the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle was pushed inside. I felt the hole in my heart become full of love and compassion. The image was finally complete. Nothing was left. Nothing was lost. Everything was regained. I was whole. I can only deduce that I was in the arms of Mama Aya, spirit of ayahuasca, and the glorious marvel of nature had manifested all of history, and I was now a part of that experience. I was now in the waiting room. This is a stage before a breakthrough where the user is transported to a hall-like or room-like place. I think this was the peak of my experience. I felt the presence of Shiva all over the place. I felt like I had been there before, but I had forgotten. Like this palace exists somewhere within my reach, within me. Like I was here before I was born, and where I will go once I eventually die, along with everyone and everything else. I suddenly saw a very alien-looking person in between the cosmic beauty. It looked very similar to the figure in visionary artist Alex Gray's artwork, The Great Turn. Here, I was able to work through a lot of my personal traumas, and it was a period of intense healing for me, spiritually and emotionally. It was in this waiting room where I stood facing the chemical spirit of LSD. It looked like a spinning and floating orb radiating rainbow-colored energy. It told me that LSD's purpose in my life was fulfilled, and there is nothing more that I can learn from it. All psychedelics ultimately lead to DMT, the strongest known psychedelic. I opened my eyes during this experience, and I saw huge globs of energy pulsating through the surface of the earth. I looked at my hands, and my entire skin was completely tattooed and inked in sacred, ancient, mystical letters or numbers, which seemed completely alien to anything I have seen. I could see the very energy of life running through my veins. On the ground nearby, I could see tunnels of energy merging and meeting with each other. I felt like I was a tribal spirit that had lived on this plane of existence for thousands of years before, and it wasn't my first time here. I felt as if I had awakened myself to the perspective of my higher self. The more I kept my eyes open, the more shamanistic I felt, connected to every molecule in the air, every drop of water in the ocean, and every grain of sand on the land. I suddenly felt deep empathy for all human beings and animals who are born into this merciless universe. The trees seemed to morph once again, but now they had taken the appearance of goddess Parvati. I was seeing the image of thousands of her all through the forest. I felt truly divine, blessed by the energy which flows through everyone and the whole of existence. I could finally hear the music of nature come alive in the calls of the birds and the movements of the grass. The trickling water felt like a part of myself that I loved and cherished. Although I could open my eyes, it was really difficult to talk or even speak any words. Things were going too fast to put into words. I felt like I had been in this experience for a few weeks. Eventually, the visuals started slowly wearing off. Bodily sensations started to return. I started to get a little nauseous. Being back inside a body felt like a very new experience. Still bamboozled by this cosmic carnival, I looked over my shoulder and saw Kenny had opened his eyes and was sitting beside me. With as much courage and effort as I could muster, I asked him, "Is this what universal consciousness feels like?" He just smiled at me and exclaimed, "You're back!" Tears of joy almost rained down my face. I had to hold them back. I felt so grateful to be alive and back into normal reality. I felt like I had been given another chance to live. I could still hear the divine music as I sipped on tea while sitting in front of a fireplace smoking a joint. It had been an hour since my trip had ended. People around me were busy with their everyday chores. I was staring at the shadows because now I know that's where the magic flows. Okay, so this was one of the more fascinating trip reports that I've had a chance to read. This one was really awesome for a few reasons. I want to start by saying, did you notice that this user was on 3 different substances? Okay. He was about to peak on an LSD trip. He was smoking cannabis, and then he took the DMT in changa form. The changas are very special here. We're going to get to that. So I'm not a neuroscientist or anything. Talking about how these different substances blend together and give you a unique experience from that perspective is way above my pay grade. But what I can do is talk from experience a little bit. And I've noticed that the flavors of different psychedelics seem to blend when you combine them together. For example, what I've noticed about the DMT trips is oftentimes they're really abrupt, intense, and rigid, even in their visual presentation. Okay. Whereas with LSD, the onset is a lot more slow, relaxing, and the entire trip is wavy in a sense. And from my own experience, mixing LSD with DMT is that sort of waviness transferred into the trip itself and even extended the duration, because once you're there and you have them mixed, where does the DMT end and the LSD begin and vice versa? Let's talk about the changa. The fact that he was using changa with this. So if you don't know what changa is changa is when you mix the free base DMT with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, the enzyme inhibitor. You take the blend of both, and it's said to increase the duration and intensity of the trip. If you notice in his trip report, he was coming in and out, in and out. That's something that you just really can't do on DMT freebase. Everything's happening so fast, you don't even know where in and out is. Yeah. But since the intensity and duration was extended through changa, I think it offered him a unique opportunity to integrate what he was seeing, to recognize what he was seeing. And also, I think because there's so much more time when you take it this way, I think it allows you to bring a little bit of yourself with you because you have time. I'm just spitballing here. Yeah. Typically, DMT trips are so short and so abrupt, you don't even know who you are. There is no time. There's just information. I can only imagine the different type of effects of an extended DMT trip. Imagine a pure DMT experience for hours, something like Dr. Strassman was giving his patients when they were on the IV. One last thing that I thought was interesting about this trip report was that he was seeing well-known deities. Okay. I've seen reports about this, seeing deities in trip reports. For example, he saw Baba Ganesha, Parvati, and Shiva. And it really begs a question, how much of our individual experience do we bring into the trip itself? Because on one hand, you see people who have seen deities, and on the other hand, there's people who have seen independently, and they all corroborate with each other, these unique sort of entities on the other side that they had no knowledge of prior to. So how much of it is this? How much of it is that? Do these deities exist? Are they real? Are they thought forms manifested by constant energy being poured to them from millions and millions of people over time? I don't know. If any of you have seen deities,
like recognizable deities, Jesus, Buddha, I don't care, whatever it is. If you've seen them in your trips, let me know in the comments. I'm really interested in this. And overall, what did you think about this trip report? It was one of the most beautiful trip reports that I've had the chance to read. So shout out to the user over there on Reddit for sharing this story. I'll put his info and a link to the trip report in the bio. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know. And if you have any trip reports of your own that you want shared with the world, feel free to email them to me at 751@gmail.com. Okay, that's the channel name at gmail.com. Anyway, it's been great being with you all again. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Godspeed.